Welcome to the webinar. We'll be joining at 10 o'clock UK time, 11 o'clock CET, so bear with us and we'll try to start on the dot of the hour. Right, good morning. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live webinar from Compliance Chaos to Coherent Control. So thank you so much for joining us today. And today's webinar, we're going to be looking at why so many ISMS programs are becoming harder to manage as organizations try to align their frameworks such as ISO 27001 with the likes of NIS2, the AI Act, GDPR, and the Cyber Resilience Act. And importantly, we're going to cover what good looks like actually in practice rather than in theory. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by Theresa Chung, Head of Compliance at Resilient and Jelo Verbijk, co-founder of DefendOT. And they're both today going to be sharing their perspectives on how to bring more joined up governance and clearer accountability. And most importantly, control in particular across IT and OT environments. And so with that, I'd like to hand over to Theresa and Jelo to get us started.
Yes, perfect. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining in this webinar. What we are talking about today is that there's still more and more certifications. There's more and more requirements that are coming towards us. And yet, while we do have more certifications in place, the board is still asking us the question, are we secure? There is less confidence, even though we have more certifications. If we look back in the past, if you have an ISO 27001, you were considered as good and doing best practices. Nowadays, the board is still asking, are we secure? What are the risks? What is left? Theresa?
Yeah, 4 regulations, 1 organization. Does that sound familiar to you? Let's take a quick poll questions. How many of you find that multiple regulations apply to your organization at the same time? Are we going to see the number? Don't know. But it seems that it's 100% yes. We haven't got any no. Okay, maybe we can go back to the slide. Yeah, so as you know, each regulation has different scope, different obligations and enforcement bodies, but they will need to be managed by the same company. So let's see, the first one, NIS2 is Network and Information System Security. It used to be something just for telecoms and infrastructure to worry about. But now, if you are providing a digital or operational service that is classified as essential or important, then NIS2 will be applicable. And then the AI Act, if your colleagues are using AI developing an AI algorithm or deploying an AI system, then you will have to understand their purpose, their scope, and then assess the risk. And then GDPR, even if we are only talking about HR data like employee data or recruitment data, job candidates, that kind of data, or the minimum recruitment and then sales and marketing data. That means your website, the cookies and mass mailing. The rules and processes are already quite complex. This applies almost to all organizations. And then the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act. If you have a hardware product, but then it comes with a digital elements, meaning it is an app, an embedded software, or it has connected functionalities, then the CRA applies. In the next slide, I'll show you what is the theoretical good way to do it. So on the top, we put down the regulation. In this example, we have put down NIS2. In the middle, we would use ISO 27001 as the management system. So we call it ISMS, Information Security Management System. This is quite commonly misunderstood as a certification, but actually it is very important. This is not just a certification. It actually gives you a structured and centralized governance framework so that you can manage all of your security controls and also risk across your company. On the left and on the right, you see two more ISO standards. They are, don't be scared about the crowded numbers, the standards there. So these two are, you can treat them as guidelines to provide more detail in your methodology. So ISO 27005 is about risk management. It gives you a more detailed step about how to identify risk, do the analysis and the evaluation. And on the right, 22301, this is about business continuity. This is about crisis, disruption. How do you ensure your operation can continue to run with minimal downtime? So with these standards, you can enrich your procedure and improve the maturity of your process. And then underneath, we have to split between IT and OT. So 27002 is for IT. They are a set of controls that you can choose based on your risk. And then 62443 is also a set of control, but this is for OT. So OT is operation technology, something like industrial environment, like you have hardware, more hardware, equipment, and even proprietary software. So we have to split because you can't just apply IT controls directly to OT. And underneath, we also put ENISA. So you can go to their website to see more guidelines. Then, we have an ISMS now. Just that, sorry, is this slide I should be handing over to Jelle to talk about how you see it in practice.
Yeah, we do have an ISMS, and almost every organization has an ISMS. It's just that nobody trusts it anymore because you do have the NIS2 regulation, and maybe we already had an ISO 27001 certification, but with a very limited scope. And looking at all those new regulations, so you have DORA, you have CRA, you have NIS2, you have ISO that you can follow, even maybe sector-specific regulations. It's always adding layer on layer on layer on your management system. And in the end, you're having controls that are completely conflicting. You have risk that isn't treated. You have other risks that maybe is treated, but you haven't documented it. So it's, like it says, it's completely collapsing under its own weight. So if we look at the next slide, it's if you look at all those different regulations, in our opinion, it's giving chaos. And how can you recognize for your own organization if you have ISMS chaos? If you are subject to this, that's one, if you have fragmented controls. So if you have a set of controls for each and every regulation, if there's a new regulation that's going to apply, that you take that as a project and you start working with it. defining the policies, defining procedures without revisiting what you actually already have. And if you do so, you get overlapping evidence because you have policies that apply for one framework but not for another framework. You are documenting it, you are pulling evidence, and in the end, you will get evidence that doesn't align with the evidence of another framework. And if you get an auditor, you get, yeah, inconsistencies in the evidence that you are providing. Also, you have competing priorities because if you have your entire organization all of a sudden that falls within scope and your management says, yeah, but IT already knows how to do things, so let them manage the entire information security management system, you will get OT operations that will say, oh no, please don't let IT touch our systems because we have systems in place that are up and running for the past 20 years, which we can't patch. They are long end of life. You can't touch them or everything will break down. So that's another symptom that you have within your environment. And in the end, if you have those fragmented controls, those overlapping evidence, you start doing more audit theater than actual implementation of cybersecurity and resilience within your environment. You are just doing checklists. You're just trying to pass audits so that you are compliant to the last or the latest framework, but you are not really looking at the effectiveness of your controls. So the goal should be not to have a certification. The certification should be the result of the efforts that you do with your information security management system. Then Theresa, for you.
Yeah, so here is the challenge. So, legal and technical. Lawyers are very good at understanding legal text. IT and security teams are very good at understanding technical controls. But if you look at your talent pool, what is the chance that you find someone who can be fluent in both languages? So legal text on the screen, you see, they look like this. Appropriate technical and organizational measures proportionate to the risk. This is a bit hard to understand. How do we decide what is appropriate, what is proportionate? And then when we look at technical controls, the wordings is very different. They are very concrete, implementable process and activities that your colleagues would do every day, like access control or vulnerability scans. The legal text does not define how much you do it, like how frequent you do, or and then with what level of detail. This kind of translation error can create uncertainties, and even different consultants or different auditors can tell you different interpretations. And then in the next slide, I will show you how these misalignments can actually pull the company apart. So this is very typical. In a company, you have the top management who has to meet business objectives like revenue growth, market access, speed to market, and they also talk about cost control, cost reduction. And then downwards, you have, of course, customers. They ask you to fill in a security questionnaire and agree on some SLAs, service level agreements. And then even some of them would ask you to participate in their risk assessments, including DPIAs. And then we have to do certification. That's audit. First of all, you have to define a sensible scope, and then you have to get ready for the evidence because you need to pass the audit. And then year after year, you also need to show incremental and continuous improvement. And then the regulations come with fixed deadline. NIS2 brings us the 24-hour early warning deadline. Within the 24 hours, your security teams do not just worry about detecting something abnormal. They actually need to classify whether that incident is classified as significant under the NIS2 criteria. And then GDPR, if it is about a GDPR incident that may be a data breach, everyone is in panic because of the enforcement actions. And then CRA, I would say, especially if you have legacy products, you would still have to go back to analyze your software composition because you will have to fulfill your vulnerability disclosure responsibility. So all of these pressures are valid on their own, but when they are not aligned, when different people, different teams are not aligned, they pull the organization in different directions.
I know organizations that have a hard time to get just their engineering team together in 24 hours, let alone that they will do an early warning of an incident that they have.
Yeah, this regulation will take some time to mature. So yeah, that's why now passing audits no longer guarantee confidence at board level. Why? So under NIS2, board members are personally accountable, both legally and financially. That also means that an executive can be barred from their management role. So if you imagine if you are the one of the board member, this really changed the conversation. You won't just, I mean, they won't just care about whether you pass an audit. They don't, I mean, the piece of paper on the wall does not matter that much now. They need to be informed about the risk and understand the residual risk so that they can make informed decisions and not, I mean, not just be informed after we have an incident. What they really need to know is what risks we are accepting, what risks we are mitigating, how, when, and then what trade-offs are we consciously making for the business. So the question becomes, how do we restructure governance so that it reflects operational reality and still give the board the confidence that they need under the regulation? So here I'm giving you a very simple model that will actually work. It's just 3 layers, and each layer has a very clear ownership. So on the first, the owner is the board, or you call it the top management. They will have to approve the cybersecurity strategy and also decide on the risk appetite. Risk appetite meaning how much risk they would be willing to accept for the organization. This matters because under NIS2, as I said, they are personally accountable. This would also mean that they are informed about the risk before they sign off the risk as accepted. And then at the second layer, we introduce an IT and OT joint security steering committee. This committee should include people like the operations or plant manager, the CISO, the OT security lead, and the engineering director. This group will own a single and integrated risk register, and they are responsible for arbitrating priorities between IT and OT, and then of course also compliance and the business operations. And then at the third layer, we focus on the operational execution. And here we would split into 2 tracks between IT and OT, and each of them handle and monitor their own environments. So altogether, this is what we mean by one ISMS, one risk register, and one governance structure. I'll then hand to Jelle to talk about how important it is between splitting between IT and OT.
Yeah, this second layer is really the game changer for organizations because IT and OT, they look completely different at the infrastructure that they have and the systems that they have. So if we go into the differences between IT and OT, is that within IT, those people are used to do weekly patches or even daily patches. They put confidentiality really as the top priority of the information within the organization. And that's not the case when you look at the OT domain. There, safety is important. And it's been this way for many decades, since the dawn of time, let's say, almost. If you have an OT organization or OT within your organization, you put priority on safety. You put safety as your top priority within the organization. Everything needs to be secure, but not in the way that we talk about security in the IT domain, but really in physical security and safety for those organizations and the people. That also means that we look at risk in a different way. So when we look at the CIA triad for the IT domain, confidentiality, integrity, availability, which is the three areas that we really look into when we look at an IT domain, we look more at safety, availability, and productivity at the end of OT. So that's a different approach. Also, the scales that we use in general are really different. So an IT administrator will look at, oh, we have 3,000 clients in the field and we have a vulnerability, which means that the anti-spam filter is bypassed on our system, which means that we could have a credential leak. So we have a risk score of 60,000 for our IT environment because we have those 3,000 users. While the OT guy says, yeah, I have a severe risk here. It's scored 24 on the scale of 25. But actually, it means that if this happens, you have 200 dead people on your hands instead of a missed mail on the other hand. And we need to make sure, and that's why that second layer is that important. We need to make sure that they speak the same language and that they report the same metrics to the board so that the board can really take informed decisions. Now, the convergence between IT and OT is also something that's happening more and more. It used to be completely separated. Now, business intelligence needs access to the OT environment, and there's a convergence layer that happens in between those systems. And in general, but I know that there's some discussion about this, the Purdue model is used to do this segmentation. Now, a Purdue model is not a security model, and I insist on this, that it's not security based on Purdue. Purdue just gives you an idea on where specific applications or assets within an organization live. And in general, where IT and OT touch each other is at a layer 3.5. Some organizations even put the layer a little bit more down so that the supervisory systems like the PLM systems and in some cases even the SCADA systems belong to the IT environment of the organization. But what my suggestion would be is let IT manage everything where you can unplug the solution. Without impacting safety. That means if your PLM system or your MES system doesn't have an impact on what you are operationally doing, you can even let IT manage that environment because they are used to doing daily patches and constant monitoring and reporting and migrations and backup and all those things. Let OT still manage what OT does best, the safety equipment. So everything that falls below that layer 3.5, let OT manage those things because they say, yeah, but OT doesn't know cybersecurity risk. No, but OT knows safety. And OT is already doing longer risk management than IT is doing risk management, but with a safety aspect of things. So I would definitely suggest or advise that there is a separation between those two, but they need to sit down together so that they can communicate and converge what risks means for each end of the organization. Now, how do you do this in a strategic and practical way? You do this in phases. The first phase that you need to do is make an asset inventory. Make that you know what is in your organization and that you have policies and procedures in place for everything that you have. But with NIS2, I would even suggest to extend your policies and procedures to also include to do or to define what you need to do for the things that you don't know that you have, so that you don't have any exceptions within your organization. So that if an asset emerges that you didn't even know that you have in your organization, and I know a lot of organizations that have many of those assets, define what you will do if you have such an asset. Who manages that asset or who will look into that asset? That's the first step that you need to do. A second and a very important step, like I said, IT and OT, they don't speak the same language if it goes to risk, but make one integrated risk register. Let each and every department handle risks the way that they are used to, with the metrics that they are used to, but have it translated to a single metric. Make sure that if risk goes to the board, that it's in the same language. If it's IT, if it's OT, if it's organization-wide, make sure that you have one integrated risk register so that everybody who is handling risk knows all the risks that there are within the organization, but they also speak the same language. You can even add a fair overlay on top of it if you want to include the CFO and talk about finance and risk. With OT guys, they don't do that, but you can add it on top of it. But make sure that there's one single metric. And then as last in the phase one, we've talked about the Purdue model, which isn't a security solution because it's just a horizontal segmentation of the different solutions that you have, but do network segmentation or even micro segmentation. Look into systems and group those systems into a segment in your network so that if there is something that happens, that it's really hard to do cross-contamination. If you get ransomware within your IT organization, in your IT infrastructure, that it doesn't impact OT. Because most incidents that do impact OT, they come from the IT side of things. If you've handled all those things, you've completed phase one, and you can go on to phase two. We are not looking into compliance yet, so we are just looking into securing our environment. Then you can start growing. You can start doing passive, and I stress passive for OT, monitoring within your organization. So that means that you can start building a baseline, what you have within your organization without disrupting the processes that are in place. If you have passive monitoring, you know what is normal for your organization, then you can go on to looking into your supply chain, which is also a really important part of NIS2 now, which wasn't that much a part of ISO 27001, but also start looking at your supply chain. And the first step that you can take there is, please don't use questionnaires because I'm sick and tired of answering always different questionnaires, but look into your N+1. That means your direct supply chain, how they handle cybersecurity, how they handle risk as well, and look in how you can benefit from them acting on those risks. If you have suppliers that don't handle risk like it's supposed to, or that aren't looking into compliancy, make sure that you also have fallbacks for those suppliers, because they are more likely to suffer an incident which can cause a disruption in your supply chain. And then as last thing, but something that definitely needs more attention than it's getting today in the most organizations, it's incident response. If you have your risk register, do me a favor and make exercises based on those risks. Look into a risk and act it out. What if this happens? And have someone help you with this so that if you are in the incident response team, or if you are in the team that needs to solve the problems or handle the machinery, have someone external do it and have injects within an incident response exercise, because it really brings to light where your team still needs to grow. So that's definitely a really, really important one. Those two phases, if they are complete, then you can look into maturing. Only then are you ready to go in the direction of a certification and start sharing your indicators of compromise with your certs, with your other competitors or colleagues in the environment. Look into a verification of the security levels that you achieve. You've set your targets when you've defined your risk, but then you can start looking into what's achieved within our organization. Those are the steps that you need to do. And if you do all those steps, compliancy is a result. It's not a goal, it will be a result within your organization. And that's an important way of moving forward. Then we have the fragmented versus the integrated part. So we have fragmented approach of cybersecurity. So we have those different regulations. What's also a really important one, and I'm looking into, I didn't skip a slide, huh? No, okay. So if you don't use a uniform way, you have separate risk registers per regulation, while, again, that, Theresa.
Yeah. If we look at the integrated approach, you see significant improvements. First of all, you have a single risk register. Each risk is tagged against the regulation it applies to, instead of being managed separately in silos. And then you have a joint steering committee, as I explained, This is where they align the priorities and then discuss the trade-offs, and decisions are made with both business and operations context in mind. Then evidence is no longer something that you have to urgently gather for audits. You would be continuously retaining evidence from the operations. It's almost like a byproduct when they actually run the process. And
Yeah.
then the board will always be informed about the risk before they make the decisions. They would be able to understand the risk, residual risk, and not just some sort of long, lengthy reports. And they would be consciously deciding what the organization is willing to accept.
Yeah.
And also, more importantly, controls will be owned by the people who actually operate them, so that they run them, they become familiar with it, they become good at what they do, not by compliance or a single security team.
We can advise on controls, but we shouldn't define the controls. The controls should be really owned by the people that are doing it. Because if we only define those controls and also say how they need to do it, probably it will break, or it won't be carried by the people that are using those controls. So that's definitely an important one. Include those people when those controls get defined, and don't just believe consultants like me. Have those people that know those systems help you define those controls. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that would make the system more sustainable.
Yeah.
And then here would be the 5 steps to regain coherence in your company. First, map your obligation. So you create the register to map the regulations, requirements from regulations with the control objectives. Then you will know what you are covering and how you're addressing those requirements. Second, you unify your risk register. So you bring the IT and OT together so that they all have a single view, and challenge and progress are shared, and both sides understand each other's risk and priorities. Third, establish the steering committee, the IT/OT joint governance body, where there is clear escalation path, and the decision authority is also defined. Fourth, rationalize controls. That's to consolidate overlapping controls. So because one control can satisfy multiple regulations, you produce the evidence only once rather than repeating it, and then even have different formats. And then fifth, you build a habit of board reporting. Remember to translate the risk into business language so that the board can understand the impact before they make the decision. So, Yella, how can the controls be workable across regulations?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, because you have those additional regulations and additional frameworks, but in the end, if you look at all those different standards, if it's ISO or NIS2 or even 62443, let's say that more than 70% of those frameworks actually means the same thing. You can have 20% that's maybe a little bit different depending if you are in IT or OT, and then some 10% that's left that can be region specific. But in the end, the goal of all those frameworks is the same thing. So if you are defining your controls, your policies, your procedures, your technical controls, or even organizational controls, do use tagging against those controls. So if you are writing a policy, tag it against the requirements that you are also complying to, tag it against the risks from your risk register, so that you have an evidence of why you are using those controls based on risk. Tag it against all the different frameworks that you have, but use tagging within your different controls, be it policies, procedures, or technical controls, against those frameworks. Secondly, is look into technology-aware design. I know that there are a lot of organizations that are pushing IT solutions towards the OT environment of an organization, which can be done because OT is more and more using IT equipment, but still there are some differences. So definitely look into what you are doing within your OT environment, and don't just push IT solutions to OT. Really look into if it isn't going to break some of those systems that are there. And then what we already touched on is the operational ownership. Make sure that the controls that are implemented are owned by the people that are operating it, not by the compliancy desk, not just by the board, and also make sure that the risk register is driving those solutions. Don't use just a checklist approach. Don't just say, oh, but we are trying to comply with 27001, so we need to look into all the 93 controls that we have in the NXA. No, risk is driving the controls that you need for your organization. And then, as last point, continuous evidence. Evidence shouldn't be driven by audits. Evidence should be always available. It should be live systems that you can connect to. You can make records or point of time references of your specific solutions if you want to use them to do an evaluation or um, analyze the efficiency of the different solutions, but it's not the evidence. It's not something that is driven by audits or driven because you need to do it at least 4 times a year. No, it's something that needs to be live, that you can look into or hook into on each and every occasion, that you need to have insights in the evidence that is within your organization. And then I wanted to share one gotcha or one watch out. So we talked also about the AI Act that is coming. And for the moment, within the EU, it's been put on hold a little bit because we don't want to limit the growth of and the innovation within the EU. But that doesn't mean that it isn't coming. So already take into account the AI Act, because compared to all the other ones, that is mostly the same thing reused in another format. ISO, DORA, NIST, NIS, it's all doing the same thing. The AI Act brings a few new control categories that didn't exist in the past. Thinking about human oversight, thinking about transparency, those are a few of those topics. So already plan for integrating the AI Act into your information security management system, because there are a lot of requirements and there are a lot of people using AI. Make sure that you are already planning for it and that you don't need to rush something and treat it as another project and another framework that you need to onboard. No, make sure that it's integrated within the solution that you have within your organization. Theresa?
Yeah, let's do a quick reality check. If you feel like you are in the situation that we have discussed today, you are not alone. 70% of organizations report that they are having overlapping, they are spending overlapping compliance efforts across multiple regulations. This can be because they didn't map the obligation to controls and the ownership is unclear. And then
And probably the other 27%, they don't know it yet.
yeah, and when controls are fragmented, organizations spend 2.5 times more effort to collect evidence. This is quite a waste of valuable man hours.
Yeah.
And then in the IT environment, 40% still have no formal security governance structure in place.
Ouch.
So yeah, this is not just one or two organization. It's actually a structural, widespread challenge across the industry.
Yeah.
Then, Yella, I think it's time to give the takeaway.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to get to the slide. Okay. What I want you guys to do on Monday morning, and maybe not even Monday morning, maybe you can even start tomorrow on Friday. It's look into your own ISMS scope. So if you have a 27001 certification, great. But I want you to look at the scope. Is the entire organization within scope of your ISO 27001? Really look into it. Does it include your OT environment, your production environment, your SCADA systems, your IoT? Even if you say, oh, but we don't have a production environment, does it include your access control system for your buildings? Does it include your HVAC systems? Does it include your CCTV camera system, your fire safety systems? Because all of them, for NIS2, they are within scope of your cybersecurity approach.
Yep. And then second step, you have to create the obligation register. Like I said, you map the regulations that apply to you, and then map the requirements from the regulation to your controls. And then you can understand which requirements you're already covering and where the gaps are.
Yeah. Then if we look further, propose the steering committee. So we talked about making a steering committee where you include members of IT and OT and even management. I think it's the ideal time, the summertime, to start planning for some barbecues where you can put all those members together. Just don't use satés because they can start poking each other. But have the people sit down together, even if it's just for a fun event to start with, but have them communicate with each other, have them align with each other, get to know each other, because they will need to work together for cybersecurity.
Yeah, and then fourth, if you want to see quick result, of course, you identify your top 5 overlapping controls. So you choose the one with the highest effort to impact ratio. If you take those first, you will quickly see reduced duplication, and then you build the momentum, because when people see the results, they build up the momentum naturally, and then you will see tangible results.
Yeah. And then as a last point, brief your board differently for once. Instead of looking at efficiency and risk posture, talk to the board at a level that the board does understand, because the board is looking into not compliancy. They want to see the risk, the residual risk, the cost. The board is all about money, so they don't want to see the colors in a matrix of 5 by 5 for your risks. They want to see mainly green, green meaning the money. They want to know what risks do we have, what will this risk cost us, what do we need to do to avoid this risk or to mitigate this risk, so that they can take actions based on that, that they can make decisions, and not something that is just based on an arbitrary number of between 1 and 25 or 1 and 60,000. They need to understand the risk better for their organization. Yeah. Let's see. The next point, question and discussion. I think I'd love to hear some feedback from the audience. I don't know if there have been any questions on what we have been presenting. Tara, you're also present. I think Tara is stuck. No problem. I see one. Yeah. Okay. I see one question. With this convergence between IT and OT happening, how do you align risk for an organization so that management understands risk? We've briefly touched upon it, but you need to have a unified framework or unified risk management language that you can use within your organization. Now, we've talked about ISO 27005 for risk management. If you look broader at the organization, you also have ISO 31000, which also talks about environment and all those things. If you look at OT environments, you do have ISA 62443-3-2 risk management for your OT environment. And they all use different metrics. What my suggestion would be is make an overlay on those metrics, have those people work in the way that they are used to, have them use, if someone is using FAIR or if they are using NIST 800 or 27005 or ISA, have them use those different risk registers, risk methodologies, but make sure that you have one overlay on top of that so that you speak the same metrics towards the board. And what I would also suggest is specifically for the board and also to include the CFO within an organization, add the FAIR methodology. So monetize those risks. What is the actual impact should this risk happen? What does it cost to resolve this risk when it happens? And run not just your own opinion, but run a Monte Carlo equation over it so that you know where your median of that risk is, what actually the monetary value of a risk is for your board. And then you can go towards the board and present risk in a way that is unified, independent of the strategy that has been used to identify the risks, but it comes in a uniform way towards management, and they can understand risk better in a level that is appropriate for the board, because they don't understand all the technical caveats that you can have.
Yeah, just to that point, and I noticed also on the chat from Daryl Ellis that making sure that you're talking in a language that's understandable by the board is going to be key. And I don't know whether you've got any recommendations on how to actually make that happen. I don't know, Theresa or Jelo, whether you've got a view on we all say that you've got to make it understandable. What does that actually really mean? What do you have to do?
Well, what I've been working on the past few months is really unifying the risk management strategy. So I've been doing deep dives in all those different risk methodologies, and it goes too deep into the nitty gritty for board to understand it. And you do need to have one language towards the board, and the language that the board understands best is financial. And you do have FAIR as a methodology that you can use, but FAIR for an OT guy, he doesn't understand it. So you do have each and every area within your organization do risk the way that they like to do risk or not have to do risk. Let them do it, but then have a layer in between, a translation layer in between, where people that do understand both ends of the organization can look into those risks, look into what management defined as being, oh, if we lose operations and we can't produce our product, it will cost us. I love to use an example where I used to work, and then I'm speaking about 20 years ago, in the supply chain of an automotive company. We had fines of 25K for each 15 minutes that we weren't producing, because that meant there was a car that didn't get assembled at the end of the line. So management said, if you go down, know that it will cost us 25K per 15 minutes. And that's a language that the board understands. They don't understand, oh, that transfer belt can break and it will take us a couple of hours to fix it. No, the board understands we will be out for 12 hours to get things fixed. So that means 12 hours, that's 1.2 million that it will cost us. What do we need to do to resolve it? Oh, it means that we just have to put some droplets of oil on the chain so that it doesn't break. It will cost us 2K to install a system like that. It's easy. It's a return on security investment that's clear. Do it. Just don't ask a question, you get the approval. On the other hand, if it's something that doesn't have any impact on productivity, on safety, or something that the board cares about, but the cost to mitigate that small risk is huge, then the board can take the informed decision. You know what? We rather accept the risk, because mitigating the risk would impact our competitiveness, and the likelihood that this would happen is so small that we can't warrant the investment that it takes to mitigate the risk. So
thanks,
I hope
Jelo. Yeah,
an answer.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, bringing it into real business terms, into real financial impact is always going to be the thing that draws attention. We have got another question in, and it was a question around SOX. So the participant wants to know that SOX hasn't been mentioned very much, and does it not fit into this framework? So I guess SOX, are we talking Sarbanes-Oxley with SOX there?
Yeah. It actually doesn't matter which framework you are looking into. We took a few of those frameworks just to show what NIS2 is all about. But no matter what framework that you use, if it's CAF, SOX, ISO, IS, all those frameworks, in the core of the framework, the goal is to have a resilient organization, to have a secure organization. And if you will really dive into the nitty gritty, most of the requirements that you will find in a SOX, you will also find in other frameworks as well. There can be some tweaks, some specific requirements that you need to comply to. And SOX, just like PCI DSS, they go a little bit deeper into it because there's more risk or more impact involved. But if you unify everything, if you look at your requirements, what you expect to have as evidence, your policies, your procedures, and your controls, you can map it against whatever framework that you choose to. So also Sarbanes-Oxley. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that it's the most important thing is really to have clear ownership defined, agreed, and then have the controls really, like Yella also said, they have to write down the controls that they do, not by someone else.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Please drop them into the chat. Theresa and Yella would love to answer anything else that you've got that's been prompted by their presentation today. I'll give people a moment.
If there are people that have different opinions than we do, also please reach out, because you never know, we can always learn.
So we have another question there. Does Resilient provide some tooling to help looking for duplicates and providing the single view, or is it an approach?
Yes, we do. So because we see that different organizations has a different combinations of regulations, so also because you would have already implemented some processes or some controls, I mean, our approach is usually to start with gap analysis. I mean, like many organizations do, but the selection of frameworks, I mean, mapping requirements to framework is quite a huge exercise. Yella himself, his company has got a tool, very good tool called Securium that can do the work quite efficiently.
Yeah. And I also want to pick in on the question or the remark of Daryl Ellis, the cyber premium in insurance. Yes, if you want to have cyber insurance, you already definitely have to look into having all those different controls in place. And even cyber insurance organizations, they are more strict than the basic frameworks that you can follow. But return on investment, if you look into cybersecurity solutions, you aren't really looking into return on investment. You are looking on return on security investment, so ROSI instead of ROI. And it's based on your annual loss expectancy rate of risk being potentially there and the cost of that risk. Also, the remaining risk, the residual risk, if you can lower the likelihood with, let's say, 80%, and you need to do a small investment to get there, you can look at the median between what would the cost of a risk materializing be before the mitigation, after the mitigation. So you can deduct the two of each other. You can look into the cost of your investment that you have, and that gives you a formula where you can look at the gains that you have by implementing a security solution. So there are, if you look up ROSI and FAIR and ALE, you will get those formulas that can help you warrant also towards the board why you should do specific investments.
Thanks, Yella. We have got one more question, and I think we'll answer this one and perhaps leave it there. So, a question from Dan Marland: is there one of the standard frameworks you see as the most rigorous, and would this be the place to start when analysing?
I can also answer that one. I do believe that ISO 27001, while not being the best cybersecurity framework, is the most suited as a management system, because you are talking about a management system, and it only serves as managing your posture or your way of approaching cybersecurity. What you do need to look into is, after that management system, the controls, because I don't believe that ISO 27002, so the Annex A of 27001, is necessarily the best framework to follow. It really depends on your organization. But I do believe that the best way to start is looking into 27001 and then look in whatever your regulatory requirements are. It can be based on NIS2. For us, for instance, in Belgium, we have the cyber fundamentals. I know that for critical infrastructure in the UK, you have CAF. So you have those different frameworks that really dive into your regulatory requirements. Use those, and do use within your management system already a separation in what you do for IT and what you do for OT, and what you do for safety systems, so that you can split them out, so that the people that really need to own the controls can focus on what they need to look into.
Thank you. I think we'll bring it to a close at that point. If anybody has got any questions, please feel free to get in touch with Resilient. We're happy to answer any further queries that you might have around this topic. And I'd just like to say a massive thank you to both Jelle from DefendOT and Theresa from Resilient for hosting this, participating in this webinar, sharing their expertise, their knowledge, and their years of experience at talking to the board, at trying to get attention from the board, at rolling these programs out, at making sure their organizations are compliant, and helping other customers and clients follow the same path as they have. So thank you very much both, and thank you all for joining. Thanks to all the webinar participants for coming along today.
Yeah.
Thanks and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.